In February 1942, Bill Barnes was ordered to report to the Manhattan Beach Coast Guard Training Center in Brooklyn. He arrived wearing a brand new suit, only to discover the training center didn't yet exist. After Pearl Harbor, so many men had enlisted that the government couldn't keep up with the needs of men going to war.
We had no uniforms, beds, weapons, or supplies, but my superiors handed me a hammer and told me to start tearing down the bathhouses at a beach resort on Sheepshead Bay, wearing my suit.
Barnes worked for several weeks with little to no supervision, when an officer arrived and decided it was time to teach the new recruits how to be in the military.
Our new CO issued orders to get up at 4 a.m., stand at attention, march around the drill field before breakfast, and take 4-hour guard shifts at night. So in the cold New York winter, still wearing our civilian clothes, we began guard duty shifts without guns or so much as a knife to protect ourselves. No one thought we were at risk of attack, but those were our orders, so that's what we did.
While Barnes continued his training and helped build the new Coast Guard Training Center, someone heard he could play the piccolo. He joined the Coast Guard Military Band and played in some of the finest theaters in New York, including Radio City Music Hall and the Metropolitan Opera House.
Since joining the Coast Guard, I'd done construction work, been a dishwasher, played in a band, and been promoted to the position of Postmaster General at the Merchant Marine Academy. I thought, this is not why I signed up. The war is passing me by. So when I saw an ad for a yeoman aboard a PC boat, I called and volunteered. I didn't know what a yeoman was or what a PC boat was, but I knew I wanted to get into the war.
Bill Barnes became a yeoman third class aboard PC 590 and served as the #1 gunner. The 173-foot PCs, or patrol craft, carried a crew of 60 enlisted men and 4 officers. They traveled in U.S. convoys and were highly effective as deterrents to submarine and enemy aircraft attacks. Barnes and the crew of PC 590 left the U.S. and made their way through the Panama Canal and eventually arrived at the island of Midway. One mission had them escorting ships into the atoll when the area was hit by a powerful typhoon.
Huge waves from the storm crested 30 feet higher than our mast, and we washed onto a reef. After the typhoon passed, the engineers discovered a hole in the hull that they patched with concrete. But there was other damage that made it impossible to travel under our own power, so we tied onto a troop transport ship for a tow. On the second day at sea, they picked up a Japanese sub on their sonar. With us in tow, the transport couldn't go fast enough or zigzag to avoid the sub, so they had no choice but to cut us loose. It was a sickening feeling to see them cut that line, leaving us alone, drifting in the most isolated place in the world. Before long, we ran out of food. But we were fortunate that our carpenter's mate was able to fashion fishing hooks for us, so we lived off the sea, eating salmon and Pacific redfish for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert.
After 62 days adrift, an American submarine spotted PC 590 and called for a tug to take it back to Pearl Harbor for repairs. The fatigued crew was sent to the Submarine Rest and Recuperation Center.
The rest center turned out to be the Royal Hawaiian, one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. We gorged ourselves on 10 meals a day, anything but salmon, and we were treated really special. After 10 days of R&R, our boat was repaired, and we headed back to the fight.
After PC 590 was repaired at Pearl Harbor, she and her crew, including Bill Barnes, headed back to Midway, a Pacific island controlled by the U.S.
New bomber pilots were being trained to fly from the island to bomb Wake Island, which was controlled by the Japanese. This gave the pilots experience in locating an island and practice at hitting the target. We were assigned to patrol just in case one of the planes was shot down. Sure enough, one was shot down at night. We searched for the pilot and his crew and finally saw a twinkle of light. They were in 2 life rafts next to the shore. We went right in there like we owned the place, made the rescue, got those boys back to Midway.
PC-590 was later escorting cruisers to Bougainville when Barnes received orders to return to the U.S.
It took me 3 months to hitchhike more than 6,000 miles from Bougainville to San Francisco. From there, the Coast Guard paid for a train ticket to New York so I could go on leave and get my next assignment. But once I got there, the chief told me all leave was canceled and I was to take a train back to San Francisco that day, board a troop transport to Saipan, and rejoin the crew on PC-590. I asked to speak to the commanding officer. He thought this was the craziest thing he'd ever heard. He instructed the chief to immediately get me on a train home to Clarksdale, Mississippi for my 30-day leave. When I got there, my mother was so glad to see me. She had 6 sons, and 5 of us were serving in the war in 5 different branches of the service. She worried about us every single day.
When Barnes returned from leave, he was pleased to find out he wasn't going back to the Pacific, but would work with a man who helped change the face of war.
After returning from duty in the Pacific, I was assigned to the Coast Guard Air Station at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn.
Floyd Bennett Field opened in 1931 as New York City's first municipal airport. In 1941, the Navy purchased the field and it became the busiest naval air station in the U.S. during World War II. Pilots and ground crews were responsible for the acceptance, testing, and delivery of newly built aircraft. Most of the planes were flown to the West Coast for use by Navy and Marine Corps units in the Pacific Theater. More than 40,000 aircraft were commissioned from Floyd Bennett Field during the war.
At Bennett Field, I had a nice bed, great food, and best of all, no salmon. I was fortunate to work with Dr. Igor Sikorsky, the inventor of the first successful helicopter.
The Navy was interested in using helicopters for air-sea rescue operations. Pilots from the Navy, Coast Guard, Army Air Forces, and even Britain's Royal Navy trained to fly them.
Our group helped develop equipment and techniques for rescue services. The Sikorsky R4 helicopters were small 2-seaters, but they had no room for a stretcher. The ability to bring back wounded soldiers was critical for rescues, so we devised a method to hang a stretcher below the helicopter and carry the soldier to treatment.
The helicopter's vertical takeoff and landing ability proved invaluable for rescuing downed or injured troops in areas that were inaccessible by other aircraft. The rescue techniques developed during World War II laid the groundwork for some of the services the Coast Guard provides today. After Japan's surrender, Bill Barnes continued to fulfill his duty as a yeoman, filing discharge papers for other Coast Guardsmen. He received his own discharge from duty on November 28, 1945. Prior to serving in the military, Barnes had hoped to become a certified public accountant, but he lost that ambition during the war and instead returned to Mississippi and took a job with the State Tax Commission. He retired after 36 years in the commission. In his retirement years, he and his wife Frances became tour directors to locales all over the world, including Nagasaki, Japan, a place he once hoped to see destroyed because Mitsubishi Shipbuilding was located in the city. Barnes felt there wasn't enough information or recognition for the Coast Guard's role in World War II, and he worked to change that. In 2009, he received a public service commendation from the Commandant of the Coast Guard. He also donated his personal artifacts to the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum at Camp Shelby to continue sharing with future generations the importance of the Coast Guard. Bill Barnes passed away at the age of 92 on March 15, 2013.